Hello, I'm Chris, and this is going to be a really fun presentation. Let me switch over to showing you the slides. Yes, how to use plugins to automate and improve your sound quality. My name is Chris Curran from Podcast Engineering School, where we teach people how to produce and engineer podcasts at the highest professional level. And I'm the host of the Podcast Engineering Show. If you haven't checked out my show, feel free. So what are plugins, right? This is going to be a fun presentation, by the way. What are plugins? Plugins are audio processors used to fix audio problems and enhance the quality of your audio, right? It's processing, basically. The most popular types are EQ, compression, denoise, taming sibilance, removing plosives, de-reverb, setting the loudness, and there are others as well. Saved plugin chains and presets are used to speed up post-production. So you can use a lot of cool plugins and just save the settings and the plugin chains. And I'm going to show you this, by the way. Why use plugins? Okay, good question. To make your audio sound good for all listeners. Audio quality impacts the perceived quality of the show and the host. So audio quality does matter. If you publish audio that is frustrating to listen to, you're basically frustrating every single listener. That is true, right? And you put out one episode, it could frustrate thousands of people, right? You don't know if your audio is not good. Conversely, if your audio sounds good, every single listener will appreciate it, even if only subconsciously. So that's the thing about good audio. When people listen to good audio, they just listen. They don't even know that it's good audio. They just listen and they're happy. But when it's bad audio, there's a problem. It catches their attention and then they stop listening to the content. All right, who should use plugins? Well, those who want to fix major audio issues to provide a good experience for the listeners. In fact, that's the whole purpose of audio production in general, is to provide a good listening experience for the listener, period. Those who want to produce audio at a professional quality, if you want to do anything professionally, you're going to have to use plugins and processors and all that stuff. And those who want to produce podcasts for others and earn a great living, like podcast production. I have a podcast production company. A lot of people edit podcasts for others, and you can earn a lot of money, but you gotta know what you're doing if you're going to charge a good amount, right, to the end client. All right, so when to use plugins? Well, mainly in post-production, okay? So after everything's been recorded, that's when you would use plugins to do the post-production. Note, the golden rule of audio production is capture audio properly the first time. So you can actually save yourself and others a lot of pain and suffering if you record the audio properly. Because fixing audio takes time and it's hard. And even though you can do it, usually it's not perfect, right? Also, in some live broadcasting situations, you can use plugins. So where to use plugins, I'm going to show you this in a minute. In your audio post-production software. So you could see on the screen is Reaper. This is my DAW. And inset in the middle here is a plugin. This is the Sheps Omnichannel from Waves. We're going to talk about this more. So that's where you use a plugin in your DAW. That's one place. You can also use standalone programs like iZotope RX7, iZotope Ozone 9, or Auphonic Multitrack, stuff like that. And also web-based services like Auphonic. They do processing. It might technically not be considered a plugin, but they just process audio. But anyway, that's one place you can definitely process your audio in a lot of ways. So I see production in two phases, right? I see two phases, and this is how I do my production. First phase is the cleanup phase. And I use iZotope RX7, which I'll show you in a second. And the top of the screen here, this is a screenshot from RX7. So the cleanup phase is, I'll show you, where we clean up a bunch of stuff. And then you have the enhancing or mixing phase, which is where you're going to put the finishing touches on it and really make it sound good and make it sound loud enough and fix some of the dynamic problems that there might be. And you can use whatever workflow works best for you. See, I do the cleanup and then I do my mixing. You can do it your own way. So just to keep in mind. All right. So the automation to save you time, this is a big part of using plugins. So number one, you can save the settings within each plugin, which I'll show you, but you see this red number 1 here. This is, for instance, the FabFilter Pro G. You can actually dial in the settings you like, and then you can save it right here. In fact, you just click this plus sign, and this is in Reaper, but your DAW might look different, but basically you can save the settings of this one plugin, usually right in the plugin. And number 2 is you can save plugin chains. So you see this big long list of plugins here, and some of them are checked and some of them are not. The ones that are checked are the ones that I'm using. And so this is the plugin chain. You can actually save this whole chain and all the parameters and settings inside each plugin. Very, very handy. So inside your DAW, let me show you how to apply a plugin to an individual voice and save those settings. I'll show you how to build, save, and apply a plugin chain. Very important. And use plugins on your master bus. I'll show you how to do that. And I'll also show you what plugins I use on my own voice for my podcast engineering show. That's my podcast. So, all right, so let me get out of this and let's go into Reaper. And this is Reaper, and this is an episode of my show. This was actually episode 190 with Dave Hamilton. Here's my voice. This is my track right here. And so what you can do, what was I going to show you first? Apply a plugin to an individual voice. So let's pretend this is my guest track. Well, it is my guest track, but let's pretend I'm going to add some plugins. So I click on effects and I go down here and I have my own little folders. So let's use a channel strip. Let's use the Focusrite SC channel strip. And here you go. Look at this. This is a plugin. So this is a channel strip. So it has EQ, has a compressor, and all that stuff. So now I applied that plugin to my guest's voice. So now when I press play and I change these settings, maybe I want to add some low frequencies, or maybe I want to remove some low frequencies, or roll off some high frequencies. These are the filters up here. Anyway, I'm not teaching you this plugin. That's how you put a plugin on my guest's voice. And if I want to add another one, I can. Let's say I want to add Soothe 2, which is another one of my favorite plugins. All right, because maybe he has some sibilance, or she. So I'll use Soothe 2, and this takes out the sibilance, okay? So now you see I have 2 plugins on here. One is the Focusrite, and one is the Soothe, and I'm using both of them on my guest's voice. So now, for instance, in Soothe, I can make a bunch of changes here, okay? Let's say I do a bunch of stuff, and then I want to save it. So like I mentioned right here, you just click plus and you say save preset, and you can name it and then save it, okay? And you can also save the plugin chain. You just go to, and again, every DAW is going to be a little different, but you can save an effects chain. See this? Save effects chain. And that'll save this chain of 2 plugins right here. And so then next time, let's just remove these real fast. Next time I want to process his voice, I can just add an effects chain, and then I can pick one. Let's say that's it, or I'm just going to pick a random one, actually. It's going off my screen. That's it. So I'm going to load a plugin chain. So here you go. This is a whole saved plugin chain that I just added, and it has a bunch of plugins. Okay, so now so you can add plugins to any specific participant, but you can also go to your master bus or your master fader. You can add an effect here. Let's say you want to add a nice, one of my favorite is the Aquamarine 4. It's a dual stage compressor, and I like to use this on my master bus sometimes, or on a vocal subgroup, stuff like that. So that's how you do that. And then, yeah, use plugins on your master bus. And then for my voice on my show, I'll just show you real quick what I actually used in this episode. First of all, I did use a gate. This is a FabFilter gate that I used. Then I used the Focusrite SC channel strip, which I love. And then I used the compressor called True Dynamics, which is a really nice compressor. Then I used the Vocal Rider, which is a really handy plugin from Waves. It automatically rides the level. Then I used the Oxford Inflator to add a little loudness, and then I used the FabFilter limiter. Okay, anyway, so that's what I used on my voice, and let's get back to the slides now. So let's go through a few of the problems that you need to fix and how to do it. So plosives are a problem. Plosives are that P, when you say like pizza or any word with a P in it. So what I want you to do right now is hold your hand right in front of your mouth and say pizza, pizza. You hear the wind. You feel the wind that hits your hand. That wind hits the microphone and can actually distort the microphone. So, and it'll be this really low end thud. It'll be like a thud, like a plosive. So to avoid them, you can use a windscreen or a pop filter on your mic. That helps avoid plosives. Or you can point the mic at your mouth from a 45-degree angle from the side, so your plosives actually go past the microphone instead of hitting it directly. So those are two ways to avoid plosives. If you have to remove them, you can check if your DAW has a native plosive removal. There's a de-plosive in iZotope RX7, which I didn't show you, but I could show you now. This is where I do my cleanup. This is iZotope RX7, and it has all these modules over here. De-hum, de-plosive, de-reverb, de-wind, de-click, de-bleed. Has lots. Anyway, there's a lot there. So that's how I do my de-plosive. Or you can use a multi-band compressor with one band from around 110 hertz and below. That'll actually compress down those plosives. So, all right, reverb. Well, you want to avoid capturing reverb because then it sounds like you're miles away. So how to avoid it? Well, have your mouth as close to the mic as possible. That's how you capture less room reverb, okay? That's one way. And also dampen the reflections in the room by putting up foam, curtains, rugs, etc. But if you do capture some reverb, how do you remove it in post? Well, check if your DAW has a native plugin that removes it. Of course, the de-reverb in iZotope RX7. Then there's a bunch of others. The SPL de-verb Plus from Plugin Alliance is a good one. And also the reverb remover from ERA is pretty good. So that's how you can deal with reverb. Noise. Well, noise is like air conditioners and cars going by and air vents, fans that you have running. So to avoid capturing noise, number one, turn off anything that's making noise. Turn off air conditioners. Close your windows. Turn off all fans. Point your mic away from the air vents. So if you do have an air vent in the room that's a little noisy, point your mic away from that so it'll pick up less of it. All right, but if you have to remove some noise in post-production, what do? Well, most DAWs actually have a noise removal plugin. You can use denoise in iZotope RX7, and there's a bunch of others. The NS1 noise suppressor from Waves is pretty good, I hear. There's a lot of other plugins too that can remove noise. All right, now getting into how we actually make, those were all cleanup processes. Now we're getting into how to make things actually sound better. And a big one is EQ. Potential problems is that there's too much low end causing muddiness. So the sound is muddy, or there's too much high end making it very harsh and painful. That's painful. Or there's not enough high end, which makes it dull and unclear. I mean, if I was supposed to speak to you like this for the rest of the thing, right? If I was going to speak like that, you couldn't really understand me. Why? Because there's not enough high frequencies, right? Solution? Well, use an EQ. You can remove some low or low mid frequencies to clean up the muddiness. You can remove some high or high mid frequencies to remove the harshness. Or if there's not enough high end, you can add high end or high mid frequencies to add some clarity. So EQ is very important. Compression is the other big one. EQ and compression are the two main processors. Potential problem? Well, a person gets really loud, then really soft, right? Too much dynamic range can cause listeners to not hear quieter parts, making them ride the volume knob, which is terrible, right? So when someone talks and they talk and it's great, and then they sort of, right? People start to mumble at the end of sentences. Compressors will help make that much more audible. So you can compress each voice so that it never gets too loud or too quiet. Beautiful. Never gets too loud, never gets too quiet. That's awesome. And also compression makes voices sound louder and closer and more intelligible. So compression is very, very important. Sibilance can be a huge problem. Pronounced sibilance can be very painful to the listeners. Sibilance is usually between 4 and 10 kilohertz, and it's usually associated with the S sound. So sibilance, S. On some people's voices, on some microphones, that sharp sibilance can really be painful. So if you do record something that has sibilance, you can remove it using a de-esser. Very handy. You need to have a de-esser at all times if you're producing audio professionally. Because you need to tame harsh sibilance. The Schoeps Omnichannel has 2 de-essers. I'm going to talk about that plugin a little bit later. FabFilter Pro DS is a great de-esser. And Soothe, well, it's Soothe 2 now. Soothe 2 by Oic Sound is really great as a de-esser. Very important. Saturation is kind of an advanced subject. So the potential problem is that digital recordings can sometimes sound too sterile with no character. Sterile with no character. So saturation is added by tape simulation and transistor simulation. So you can actually add plugins to make it sound like it was recorded on tape or recorded with older equipment. It makes it more pleasing to the ear. And you can actually use a saturation plugin to add harmonics and slight distortion to make it sound more vintage and pleasing. But don't overdo it. That's the thing with saturation. You don't overdo it. You can add a little, makes it sound nice and smooth, nice and fat, or nice and warm. Okay, FabFilter Saturn 2 is a great plugin. Schoeps Omnichannel has a saturation module in there. Ozone 9, True Iron's a great one. Okay, let's keep going. All right, balancing the levels of all the voices. Well, this is important because the potential problems are that if one person is way louder than the others, it makes it very annoying to listen to. I think most podcasts in the world have this problem when there's an interview. Like the host might be really loud and then the guest's level is much lower. And it's not fun to listen to. You need to put the voices at the same level, make them the same volume. So it's easy to listen to. So use your ears to balance the levels of each participant to make them the same level. Or you can set each person's track to the same LUFS level. That's a whole nother conversation, but you can do that in Adobe Audition, for instance, and in other ways as well. You can use Auphonic, which is a cool service to level all the participants, and also use Vocal Rider, which I also previously mentioned from Waves. So there's a lot of ways you can use to balance the levels of the voices, but that's very, very important. Okay, loudness of final episodes. Well, there is an unofficial standard in podcasting of how loud your final episode should be. The potential problem is that if your final episode is not loud enough, listeners may not be able to hear it well in some listening environments. So your final episodes need to be loud enough. So like if someone is in a loud environment, or maybe they're jogging, or maybe they're in a gym with there's music playing in the background, like people need to crank up the volume if they need to. So your episodes should be loud enough. So set your episode's final LUFS level to -19 LUFS for mono, or -16 LUFS for stereo. And some DAWs can actually do this when rendering the episode audio. And you can also do it in Isotope RX7 and Auphonic, etc. So this is a very important part of production. Okay, popular plugin companies. Well, you got Waves, FabFilter, Isotope, Plugin Alliance, SonarWorks. There's a lot. I'd say these first few, Waves, FabFilter, and Isotope, are very good and very prominent in the plugin world. And these others are all very good too. Some of them are more expensive, all that stuff. But anyway, there's a lot of plugin companies. My recommendation for your first few plugins, well, number one would be the Schoeps Omnichannel from Waves. And here it is right here, because it actually has it's a channel strip. It has everything in it: EQ, compression, 2 de-essers, saturation. It has a gate, an expander, has a limiter, and you can move these modules around. It's a very handy plugin. A lot of times it goes on sale for very cheap too, $29 or $39, something like that. The other plugin that I would recommend for your first few plugins is Vocal Rider from Waves, which is this one, this is the one I mentioned that automatically rides the volume. If someone gets too loud, it'll actually pull the fader down. It'll bring them down a little bit. And if someone starts mumbling at the end of a sentence, if they start trailing off, it'll push up the fader at the end of the sentence so that you can hear the end of the sentence. Very, very handy for podcast production. Also, I just made a post called Top 10 Audio Plugins for Podcast Production. So go check out my top 10. And this is the URL. So podcastengineeringschool.com/top10. You might want to write that down or just type it in and go there now just to see it. Okay. And also you can hear the audio quality of my show. This is something good just as a reference. So it's the Podcast Engineering Show, and we actually talk about audio production in depth. So if you want to just, sort of evaluate the quality of my show, which I produce myself, obviously, check out my Podcast Engineering Show. All right, and that's the end of the presentation. I know I went quick because I wanted to have time for questions. So just to remind you, I'm Chris Curran from Podcast Engineering School, host of the Podcast Engineering Show. And if you have questions, I'm here to answer them. So let them rip. Any questions? Put them in the comments. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you.